Hare Krishna, Namaste, Chapter 18, which is entitled as Sannyasa Yoga. Sloka 36 and 37, Part 2. Sukhaṁ idānīṁ tri-vidhaṁ, śṛṇu me bharatarṣabha, abhyāsād ramate yatra, duḥkhāntaṁ cha nigacchati. Yattad agre viṣamiva, pariṇāme mṛtopamam, tat sukhaṁ sāttvikaṁ proktam, ātma-buddhi-prasāda-jam. O best among Bharatas, happiness is of three kinds, based on the three gunas, sāttvik, rajasic and tamasic. Now I shall describe them. Listen to me. The happiness one comes to enjoy after long practice, the happiness on attaining which all the worldly sorrows are utterly destroyed, the happiness which is bitter like poison at the commencement of yoga and becomes sweet like nectar as the yoga develops more and more, that happiness born of the clarity of knowledge regarding the self is sāttvik. Before we further go into this sloka, we need to understand the difference between sukhaṁ and ānandam. Sukh or anand, they are certainly not one and the same, though it may appear to be, but they have their differences. Before understanding the differences between sukhaṁ and ananda, we need to understand what sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ are. Ka means space, su means good. When you combine it, good space. In other words, that experience that one goes through based on space and time, if it is good experience, it is called sukhaṁ. Whereas duḥkhāntaṁ, ka again means space, du refers to bad or sad or distress. That is to say, within a given space and time where one experiences sadness, or that is opposite to good experience, is said to be duḥkhāntaṁ. So duḥkhāntaṁ is opposite of sukhaṁ, sukhaṁ is opposite of duḥkhāntaṁ. But both sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ is constrained within a space and time, which means space and time varies every moment, which implies that sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ also fluctuate. Either one stays for a long period. For example, if we give some money to a poor needy person, that person is going to have sukhaṁ, happiness, for that space and time. It is not going to be for rest of his life, because as he spends his money is drained, as well as his happiness is also being drained. Back to duḥkhāntaṁ, a space and time where he is again in a distressful state, and that state continues. He finds someone, gives alms again. Whereas ānanda or ānandam closely refers to joy, but it is not same as sukhaṁ. The counterpart for sukhaṁ is called duḥkhāntaṁ, but there is no counterpart for ānanda, and it is not based on space and time. It is not restricted by these two. As one engages in sukhaṁ for a long period, that ends to give ānanda. Nandana, nandam means joy, joyfulness. Sukhaṁ means happiness. That sukhaṁ which continues for a long period without interruption leads to ānanda. Sukhaṁ is the cause of happiness, which is nothing but when the undesirable things goes away and desirable things comes upon. That is called sukhaṁ. when the undesirable things completely goes away and only brings in all good things, then that stage is called Ananda. Therefore, Sukhaṁ, which leads to Ananda, is said to be Sāttvika Sukhaṁ. If one has to get to Ananda, everlasting joy, bliss, then that has to be something to do with which is also everlasting. It cannot be momentary, it cannot be temporary, perishable things. If I get happiness because of me having an expensive car, that happiness is not going to be continued for long. One may be happy and derive pleasure until they get the car and they drive for few days, few weeks, few months, few years. After that, the happiness over the period is not the same happiness that one had at the beginning. That changes. And this theory or concept is applicable to anything that we deal in this world, whether it is a thing or a person. For example, a newly married couple, they hold their hands together while walking, they stay together, they eat together. This continues for a week, month, or few years. After that, it is not the same mood of happiness after few years that they had in the beginning. Let's see one more example. When a person consumes alcohol, it gives Sukhaṁ. But when one continues to drink for a long period, it is not going to end up with Ananda. That is for sure, we all know. So the point here is, it is not that by having Sukhaṁ, by repeatedly doing something, will end up Ananda. Rather, by repeatedly doing something which is giving happiness, may end up in a miserable situation as well. Therefore, that Sukhaṁ, which continued for a long period, ends up in Ananda, is said to be Sāttvika Sukhaṁ. That is practicing devotional service, Krishna consciousness, meditation upon the self or Paramatma, not on the blank screen or a lamp or a dot on a white sheet. It is to focus on oneself. When that continued for a long period, that leads to Ananda, joy, bliss. But those Sukhaṁ which does not end by giving bliss, joy, then that falls under Rajasa and Tamasa Sukhaṁ, which will be explained later in the following slokas. In general, happiness is always understood based on that derives through our body and senses. I am happy if I have a good place to live, good dress to wear, good sleep, place to sleep. When I get good food to eat, I'll be happy. If I could travel around the world and see many cities, I'll be happy. If I have people around to sit and chat, I will be happy. If I can watch the latest and greatest movies, I will be happy. But we should know all this happiness is there as long as that object exists. Even if that object exists, our happiness is not going to continue after some period, which means it is not going to lead us to Ananda. Krishna says, agre viṣamiva. It appears like poison in the beginning. What is it appears as poison in the beginning? Whatever we need to practice to attain the ultimate happiness. In the beginning, it is always difficult for us to start anything good, follow any good advices. Therefore, it is like poison. We are no different from the children. Children on their level do not hear to good advices. because they feel it's like poison. Don't eat too much chocolate. It's not good for health. The children will not listen. The chocolates taste sweet, whereas the good advices that's given taste bitter and looked upon as poison. We also have a similar nature. We are just grown by age and body. When the scriptures, acharyas, gurus, they give instructions to us, we see that as poison, tastes bitter. Why? Because it requires a lot of effort to practice on our end so that we can achieve ananda, everlasting happiness. And the happiness that we are talking here is based on the Atma and Paramatma, not based on the body and senses. When we focus our happiness on body and senses, it is Rajasa and Tamasa Sukhaṁ. When we focus our happiness based on the Atma or Paramatma, then it is said to be Sāttvika, in the mode of goodness. Now again the same question, why it is difficult to derive happiness based on Atma or Paramatma? In other words, let's take this question in a different angle. What is that will derive me happiness based on Atma and Paramatma? Well, we must have control of our mind and senses which wanders everywhere. We strictly live a life as suggested by the scriptures and great souls. We very much be watchful on our thoughts, speech and action. We practice silence, talk less. When we talk less, talk only that pertain to Atma and Paramatma for the benefit of ourselves and others. One tries to live in a secluded place where there are devotees and saintly people live in a community. One eats only prasadam, food that is offered to Krishna. One tries to read the scripture on a daily, regular basis. One chants every day, meditates every day, be in the mood of servant, be humble and submissive to spiritual authorities, and among the devotees, like-minded people. We can see all these practices requires some effort from one side. It may be difficult because we are not used to them, but we are very much experienced, used the opposite of these things. It requires no effort on our side. We let our mind wander everywhere without any control, including our senses. Loosely live a life as suggested by the scriptures, not paying attention to the scriptures, doesn't even know that there are instructions given in the scriptures for our better life. Carelessness in how we think, how we speak and how we do things. Practicing silence is an alien for us. We talk more than what is required, neither related to soul and super soul, nor such talks has any benefit for oneself or others. It would be totally waste of time for both the parties, the speaker and the hearer. We live in an environment where there are no devotees, but surrounded by bogies, materialistic people. People eating habit is so messed up. Don't care what one puts into their mouth. Eat anything and everything from anywhere without any consideration. Doesn't make any difference for them whether it is offered to Krishna or not. All matters for them is to eat something to satisfy their tongue. For one to chant every day is difficult. what to speak about meditation, super difficult. They are not in the mode of servant, rather they are in the mode of boss. Being humble, submissive are not in their dictionary. Therefore, we can see these things are not at all hard in general. They are very natural for one. Whereas to control mind, to live according to the scriptures, to be very thoughtful about one's thought, speech and action, maintain silence, be in the association of like-minded people who are also sattvic, eating food that is offered to Krishna, chanting and meditating every day, being in the mood of servant, being humble and submissive, it's all difficult at the beginning. Therefore, they see this as poison and start telling, my body will hurt. If I do all these things, I'll become tired physically and mentally. I'll be drained. They find reasons to get excused themselves. But those who are sattvic, they know the Lord is the one who gives us the strength. He removes all the bodily difficulties when we engage in devotional service and gives us mental sustainable power for us to continue our spiritual practices. When we understand, we will become enthusiastic to start engaging in devotional service, in practice of yoga. For those who doesn't understand, it is the Lord who helps us. Who doesn't understand the secret, they will never start anything good in their life. The material science teaches us to see us, the self and body, to be one and the same, whereas the yoga teaches us to see the body and Atma are two different entities. And this is what they teach in yoga, to see ourselves outside of our body. They teach us to focus each part of our body and organ and slowly then focus on the body itself, meaning staying away, aloof from our body. And this practice, this thing is not going to come in day 1 or day 2 or even after 1 year or 2 years. It requires continuity. Therefore, it is difficult and there are a lot of resistance to take up such practices. Hence, it's seen as poison. But if we keep faith in Krishna and take up Krishna consciousness and start practicing devotional service, yoga towards the self and Paramatma for a longer period, that which tasted or seen as poison will change and becomes nectar. And when one releases that nectar, will never want to go back to that happiness which has nothing to do with Atma and Paramatma. Because that sukhaṁ which led to Ananda is everlasting, uninterrupted, ever extending and sustainable. Therefore, we should all come to a platform that happiness is not dependent on any external objects or our body and senses. Our children, spouse, relatives, friends, employer, colleague, car, house, our savings, our appearance, our special skills, because this is all related to our body and senses. Such happiness is temporary and certainly will come to an end one fine day. More we focus on these things, more we will get entangled, leading to extended suffering. Then the question comes, how to then be free of bodily sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ? Answer is to understand that the body and I are two different entities. Anything that happens to the body, I am not being affected. It is the body which is getting affected. Well, that is the difficult part, to come to that realization. Let's see an example. Say we heard that at the corner of the street an accident happened and someone passed away, and one of our family member who just went out for shopping has not returned back. So it immediately brings us a sense of duḥkhāntaṁ, connecting the accident and the person who has not returned yet. When we immediately rush to the spot, when they remove the blanket that covers the face of the dead person, I get a big relief. Why? It is not that person whom I thought. He is not my uncle. He is not my so-and-so. That changes my duḥkhāntaṁ to sukhaṁ. But interestingly, that sukhaṁ of mine did not bring that person who's dead there back to life. He is gone for good. So, my sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ is completely based on whether am I related to that person or not. If I am related, then it brings duḥkhāntaṁ. If I am not related, it's the same person but brings me sukhaṁ. Let's take one more example. We are hearing a couple of countries are going through some war, and people who have gone to study in that country, the students, are now in a difficult situation, and their parents are not in the same country. When the parents who are abroad hear that there have been continuous bombs is being put on the other country, and they are concerned and worried what would happen to their son who's gone for higher studies. They are in duḥkhāntaṁ, but that duḥkhāntaṁ vanishes immediately when they receive a call from their son stating he is safe. Then the parents' duḥkhāntaṁ now switch to sukhaṁ. So we can understand the fear of the parents. The duḥkhāntaṁ is not that the war is happening between these two countries. They are least bothered about the war factor. What bothers them, what made them into a state of duḥkhāntaṁ, is that person who's related to me is safe or not. If my son is safe, then I am happy, sukhaṁ. If he is not safe, then that brings me duḥkhāntaṁ. So again the same point, the sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ is completely based on what relationship that I have with that particular object, that particular person. If I don't have any connection, any relation, then I am in a state of sukhaṁ. If I have a connection, then that brings me duḥkhāntaṁ. With these couple of examples, let's get back to our original question. How can I be free of sukhaṁ and duḥkhāntaṁ that's related to body and senses? Well, how I was not disturbed when I saw the face of the dead body is not related to me. How I was not disturbed by the war that was happening between the country, because that war is not related to me. In other words, those hundreds and thousands of people who died are not related to me. Therefore, I am not disturbed because of their death. Likewise, this body is not related to me. The body and Atma has no connection. Atma is different and body is different. We are residing within this body due to our karma. That's the only connecting factor. Otherwise, I have no relationship with this body. When we understand this, then anything happens to our body and senses which brings us happiness or distress, I will not be concerned, because those things are to do with the body, not with me. When this knowledge takes place, and with this knowledge, when one starts enthusiastically focusing towards Atma with proper determination, the duḥkhāntaṁ goes away. Sukhaṁ comes into the picture. When it continues, then that sukhaṁ leads us to ānandam. mṛtopamam. That changes agre viṣamiva to mṛtopamam. Initially when we started, it was like poison. But then with proper understanding, with proper guidance and help from others who are also practicing or who are matured in their practice, that tasted, seen as poison, changes to nectar, amritam, which is considered to be the higher grade of happiness. All the lower happiness and miseries are gone for good. One comes to a point where there is no more suffering, sorrow. Duḥkhāntaṁ cha nigacchati. That is the stage when a union happens between Atma and Paramatma, soul and super soul, which means end of all distress in this world. The mentality to enjoy the worldly things through the body and senses comes to an complete end. That time a person is not agitated, disturbed by anything. He is in peace. As long as that person is in this world, he is joyful. And obviously when he leaves the body and returns back to the spiritual world, he continues to be joyful to the fullest. ātma-buddhi-prasāda-jam. With long practice, when contemplation matures, the self in its original nature is perceived. At that stage, all the doubts and queries regarding Atma, Paramatma, which we have been having for a long time, will disappear. In other words, all other objects that are external to us are withdrawn from our buddhi. Our buddhi becomes pure, clear. Prasadam means clarity. Another meaning of prasadam is clarity. Not getting engaged in other things. Why? Because prasāda-jam, the clarity is born. That means sāttvika buddhi. When we have that sāttvika buddhi with sāttvika dhriti, we engage in activities that gives us sāttvika sukhaṁ, which is the cause for ānanda. Ānanda of connecting ourselves with Paramatma, Jiva union with Paramatma. And that happiness that derived from this connection is everlasting, because that relationship between Atma and Paramatma is eternal, unbreakable, whereas our happiness based on the material thing are not eternal. To summarize, the happiness one comes to enjoy after a long period of practice. Number 1. Number 2, the happiness on attaining which all the worldly sorrows are utterly destroyed without leaving any trace of sorrow. Number 3, the happiness which is bitter like poison at the beginning of practice of yoga, but then becomes sweet like nectar as one continues practicing. And fourthly, that happiness born of the clarity of knowledge regarding the self is said to be sāttvika sukhaṁ. In the next verse, we will learn about rājasa sukhaṁ, happiness in the mode of passion. Sukhaṁ idānīṁ tri-vidhaṁ, śṛṇu me bharatarṣabha, abhyāsād ramate yatra, duḥkhāntaṁ cha nigacchati, agre viṣamiva, pariṇāme mṛtopamam, sukhaṁ sāttvikaṁ proktam, ātma-buddhi-prasāda-jam. Namaste. Hare Krishna.